Welcome back, it's Eborn here with Lives on Lockdown. I'm delighted that my special guest today is the award-winning magician, Lee Hathaway. And just before the break, Lee, you were telling how your favourite routine involves a penknife, and you go up to people and you say to them, "Have you lost this penknife?"
It's a classic. All magicians should do it. It's an absolute classic. Yeah, I highly recommend it.
I'll tell you what, one of the best tips, and one of the best tips I think in life is just to be yourself, isn't it? Because if people want to see you, that's what they want to see. They don't, as good as the questions are, do you want to see this and everything else? I think if you're there and they think, actually, this could be quite interesting, you're only invited in, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a marvellous Barbra Streisand quote, which is always be a first-rate version of yourself and not a second-rate version of somebody else.
It's a good quote.
Which is a great quote, yeah. And there's so many variants of it, but the only person you can really be is yourself, you know. And yet you see so many people who, when they learn magic, or I think a lot of performance skills, when they're interacting with people, that try and that hide behind either the thing they're doing, or or find it very difficult to be that person. You know, I was having a conversation with who was I talking to the other day, and we did.
You've forgotten his name, haven't you?
No, because it was it was Matthew. Yeah, Matthew Lamotte. He's got a really good.
Oh yes, very good. He's an award-winning magician. He's one of the few times.
He is absolutely, and he's the award-winning magician.
Wow, there's no messing there. I think he did the consecutive ones, didn't he? He went for the
3 years in a row. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I helped him work on those acts, and we spent a lot of time here on the boat actually, going over stuff and. Refining things and working out, sort of changing the pattern and that. He worked really hard on those, really hard, and good luck to him. He's done really well. But no, I was doing a little chat. He's got a little podcast called Give Him Magic on Instagram, which is really good. And we were having a chat on there, and we were talking about just that question you asked about being yourself, you know, and and how important it is to be a performer, you know, and we were talking about stage stuff in a way, and I got onto street performers because, as you know, I was a street performer in Covent Garden for many years, and I owned the Magic School in Covent Garden for near on 8 years with the marvellous Neil Henry, and super talented man at everything. Sort of what do you call that? Polyglot, is it? Or
Polyglot's a different thing, but yes,
it is. Yeah,
I think poly's applied to everything. We love it.
Yeah.
It's got to be good.
Yeah, poly something. Yeah.
Put the kettle on.
Anyway. And I was talking about a bit on stage really, and being that character. You know, and I remember Paul Martin years ago trying to learn, great magic friend of mine, you know, one of my best mate in magic, and Paul tried to learn the floating linking rings, and this beautiful smooth, and I can see you smiling straight away, but for those watching who don't know, Paul's character is very kind of laddie, cockney, you know, a bit cheeky, sort of South London, you know, hello mate, how you doing, you know, and it's brilliant. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, people just need to like him, you know, but wherever he goes, but it just doesn't suit his character at all, you know, and it ended up being a disaster. And there was a street performer in Covent Garden, this guy called Andy, who used to come on, and he really wanted to be taken seriously as a magician, you know, and he was just scruffy, and his magic always went wrong, and he really didn't have the technique, and his hair was all over the place, and you know, and he looked like this sort of weird character. And one time he'd gone to the toilet and he rushed off to do his show, and there was a bit of toilet paper hanging out the back of his shoe, and he went on and he messed up everything, and the table fell over in the wind, and he came off the pitch, and he's like, and he's going, oh bloody hell, you know, and me and Sergio, Sergio Barros is a legendary street performer now in Covent Garden. He's done it for so many years and really made it the routine his own. But Sergio and I were killing ourselves laughing, and we were absolutely killing ourselves laughing, and we were like, if only he realised that that's his character and characterised it and embraced it, rather than fighting against it all the time.
No,
you know,
you're right. And it is that juxtaposition. I mean, if people analyse comedy, and there are people who are doing this, and it goes all the way back to Poly, it goes all the way back to the Greeks and beforehand. The juxtaposition of the unexpected is exactly what you want. Now, John Archer and Guy Hollingworth as performers couldn't be more different. John is a typical sort of northern comic type, aggressive, and Guy is Mr. Sophistication personified, isn't he? What I loved is when they both did at an event, they did each other's acts. And so Guy did the northern comic bits, and he
I
came
never
up with
saw
the
that.
ukulele and that sort of stuff. And John did the sophisticated little wonderful things with Guy, and it
Oh,
was
I'd love to have
hilarious
seen that.
and brilliant. So
I'd
I
love to
think
have
where
seen
you
it. Where was that? Where
challenge
was
those
that?
expectations, it works really well, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, yes, that's true. However, Andrew, right, there's a caveat here, right?
Well, look at you with your Latin. You've gone from polys to caveats. God, you're showing off now. Award-winning magician. God.
Yeah. I think in order to do that, I think you have to be as good as Guy and John. And what I mean by that is in the sense of them both knowing their characters already and understanding how to perform, then yeah, you can take somebody else off. I could go on stage and perform as somebody else because I've watched them and I recognise their character. But I don't. But that's not. But it's just there's a slight difference, I think, between impersonating somebody and knowing that's not really you, and actually trying to be that person because it's all about to do an act in that style. Yeah, you know, that's not for, you know. I could sit here now, you know, and show you an act in the style of Tamariz. You know, I mean, I wouldn't be Tamariz, and it wouldn't be anywhere, you know, as incredible as some of the stuff that he can do, but I could do that. You know, I could say, okay, now we're gonna choose a card, and I shuffle the cards. Okay, wait. You know, I could emulate that style, but if I tried to do that all the time when I was at a gig, it just wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't work because that's your personality the whole time when people are asking you questions, when you're interacting with people, you know, all of that. That's what you need to, I think, understand as a performer and be that, and like you said, be yourself and be that person, you know, and you can characterize it slightly if you're on stage, or you can make adjustments to that character, but to understand who you are, like for Tommy Cooper, for example, you know, who, you know, Tommy Cooper could never have done a slick, you know, Channing Pollock style Lance Burton Dove act. It
Although
just
he
wouldn't
really
have worked,
wanted to,
you know?
when he first started.
Absolutely, yeah.
He wanted
yeah.
to, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh no, of course. And I think that's the thing is a lot of magicians, you know, a lot of people take up magic, you know, or because they want to be that, you know, whatever it happens to be, that suave kind of, you know, guy in the tux producing the cards and, you know, and that sort of thing. And yeah, it doesn't suit everybody. And to understand what your character is and be comfortable in your own skin and be able to go out and do that is a great thing, you know. It's probably like you alluded to yourself, probably the most important thing in terms of being a performer when you're working is to it gets said again and again and again. And I remember it was said to me when I was a youngster learning magic and I always thought, what does that mean? Be yourself, because how can I be anybody else? You know. But I guess it's about sort of not trying to. When you're younger, I think you do emulate other magicians. You know, I like used to watch David Williamson a lot. You know, and I tend to think that my generation very heavily influenced by Paul Daniels and Wayne Dobson because that's who you had on TV. You know.
I know,
so,
and it's exactly that.
Yeah.
And the advice is Daniel Lismore, who said, "Be yourself because everybody else is taken." And I think the general sort of principle, and magic is itself to blame, because when people go out and they buy some magic, not only do you get what you might need to perform the magic, you also get given a routine. And the routine gives you tired old lines. And so many times you and I have sat in an audience, sometimes been on the stage ourselves, and we've heard these people regurgitate these tired old lines, but regurgitate them really, really badly anyway.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, one of the routines, and I've got a few friends that do it, so I don't want to. But I mean, one of the routines that I find particularly cringeworthy is a vanishing bandana, because
I was going to say I could almost predict, but yet in the hands of somebody like Terry Herbert, it wonderfully does an audience really, really well.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's a great example of. I think in fact, and Terry Herbert's another great example of someone who really knows his stuff inside out to be able to do that. And I think my point I was going to say was, in order to parody something, or in order to break the rules, if you like, you have to know them in the first place. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if you watch someone like David Williamson on stage, you know, he constantly breaks rules. You know, what things you shouldn't do when you bring kids up, the way you deal with audience. You know, but he always pulls it off, and it always looks like a stroke of genius. You know, and and that comes from knowing what those rules are in the first place and knowing just how far you can sort of push them another way. If you just go on and try and do that, you'll fail.
Sure. And that applies to comedy as well. So Les Dawson was actually a great pianist.
Yes.
He was a really great pianist, and he learned how to do it. But then he said, well, okay, this is how you mess it up. And then that becomes funny, doesn't it? Because you're breaking.
Absolutely,
Ali Bongo used to say, if it's not broken, break it. So you work on that sort of principle where you're challenging yourself to do something good. And one of the biggest things, and magic is brilliant. We know lots of fantastic magicians. The saddest thing, however, it's one of the art forms which is the easiest to get into, isn't it?
Well, certainly these days. I mean, with the the internet, there's so much easy access to information, and people can watch YouTube videos online and all that sort of thing. I didn't find it hugely easy to get into when I was a kid. I mean, I suppose so. I mean,
sorry, I don't mean to get into it and do it well professionally. I mean, you could go to a shop, you could pull a Christmas cracker, you can get a little bit of plastic, and it says do this, and people, they read that and they go there, and it's awful because they're missing the elements of it. It's not about learning how the magic is done; it's learning how to perform it and present in other bits and pieces. I think that's.
Absolutely. But I mean. Oh no, absolutely, yeah. But I mean, it's likewise, you can get a joke in a Christmas cracker and tell it. It doesn't make you a comedian. You can get a karaoke set for Christmas. And you can go on holiday to Benidorm and belt out, Whitney Houston in the karaoke bar, but it doesn't make you a singer. I mean, people will have a go at. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's all a bit of good fun. I mean, what's more upsetting than that is when people have got a few things out of Christmas cracker, been down the magic shop, learned some stuff, gone down the pub and shown their mates for about 6 months, and now they've got a website and are charging £500-600 for a gig suddenly.
And those are award-winning magicians. Absolutely.
That's more upsetting, but
that's what I mean in terms of getting into it, because if you're a bad singer, you're not going to get a gig. Anybody can advertise themselves as a magician, and as I say, as an award-winning magician, and get gigs. They may not get very many, but they can advertise, and that's what I mean when I say it's easy to get in.
No, absolutely, yeah. And as you know, I mean, years ago, if you wanted to set up a business, you had to have, you'd have to possibly have premises. You need an advert in the Yellow Pages. You needed to put and other avenues, and it was more, there was more. It took a lot more. Whereas nowadays, you can put up a fantastic website and look incredibly professional. If you've got good web design skills, you can probably look better than some other people that haven't. And it doesn't cost much to do if you know what you're doing there. Yeah, I mean that's a real shame. There's no barrier to entry in terms of what to find. I mean the amount I've seen. I've seen websites, and I won't mention any names at all, but, people who I know have only done magic for, 6 months a year or stuff. And it's like, award-winning professional magician. Well, professional? How can you be professional in a year? You know what I mean? People spend years studying stuff. If you look at a professional snooker player or, and also the other thing with magic, I think, which is really key to this is, generally, you have two barriers to entry. Either you have a professional qualification. So, for example, you couldn't be a doctor or a lawyer, etc., unless you had a professional qualification. Magic doesn't have anything like that. Or it's just obviously apparent how good you are. If you're a snooker player and you can't hit breaks of 70, 80 plus, then clearly you're no good. But a lot of the public don't really know what the difference between a good and a bad magician is, because they've never.
This is where something like the Magic Circle,
and it's not apparent. It's not immediately apparent what is good or bad. Yeah.
Well, no, but as I say, this is where something like the Magic Circle, the Magic Circle in particular, comes into its own, because the Magic Circle should be a badge of excellence. You have
absolutely
to pass.
Absolutely, and one of the reasons
an examination. Everybody has to pass an examination in front of other members of the Magic Circle. Even HRH, Prince Charles, he had to pass an examination with the cups and balls and in front of that sort of sign. And great pictures on the Magic Circle. So that, in a way, is a guarantee, or should be a guarantee, of quality for people looking for an act. What do you think?
Well, I completely agree with you. And one of the reasons that I spent so many years, as you will know, volunteering for the Magic Circle, standing on the council, doing the membership stuff, redesigning a lot of the IT and the back end of it and trying to modernize it in some ways, and I don't just, but not single-handedly, it's a team effort from all the other people that work so hard at the Magic Circle, but it's because I believe in the Magic Circle, and I think it's a really great organization, and we're very, very lucky to have it, and yes, you can go back in history and you can go back and you can talk about its misdemeanors and the things that have, it hasn't done so well, or, et cetera, but intrinsically, I think it's a great organization. It's a great thing to have, and we as magicians, I always look at it as, that even within the Magic Circle, they're not so much these days, but there was all this actually sort of them and us, and it's like, well, it's not. I've always felt it's your club. It belongs to every magician, and it's, as a magician or someone that's interested in magic, it's your duty to try and belong to it and make it better. And I know there's people that will disagree with that, and there's people that can bring up all the politics, etc. But generally speaking, I think that it's an important thing to do. And when I was a kid, the one thing I dreamed of doing or wanted to do was be a member of the Magic Circle. And then it was just a mythical thing. It wasn't somewhere I'd ever been. I didn't really know what it was, but it was like it was this mythical thing that you wanted to be a member of. And I can remember I went to it when it was at the Victory Services Club. The first time I ever went to the circle, and that was at temporary premises. So there wasn't all the walls adorned and with memorabilia and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, premises wise, it was a bit disappointing because I'd built up so many expectations of going there, but I still had a marvelous time, and it was incredible to meet all these magicians and see them hanging around and be in that environment, just in that environment. But so yeah, I do think that the circle, it should be that. Yeah, whether it is so much these days, I don't know. I mean, you've got Dynamo's very good at promoting the Magic Circle. He often mentions it when he's in interviews. As Steve Allen on LBC in the mornings. He's a member, isn't he, Steve?
He is a member, and he does a tremendous amount of the Magic Circle. He also
always talks up the Magic Circle. So it is still in the public. It is still in the public eye. And I think anything that can be done to raise its profile like that, and also instill within the public and bookers that's something they should be asking about. Is, are you a member of the Magic Circle? Because not even the people that will slag it off or have an issue with it, etc. And there are some, but I think that to establish an industry standard or to have something in the public eye, and whether or not it's perfect, you shouldn't, what's the saying about, don't let good get in the way of, don't let perfect get in the way of good, but just to have that in the public eye, I think would be a really good thing, because
I think you're absolutely right on what you're talking about. As I say, it is the easiest thing to go out there, buy some stuff and advertise yourself as a magician. Having that badge of excellence where you've been judged by your peers that you're of a sufficient standard is something that can give confidence to the public. And I think that's the important thing to say.
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, as you know, well, I'm quite happy to say this on it, but as you know, there are people who are members of the Magic Circle that I wouldn't give a gig to, in a million years, but that's, and you look at me, but and I know, there's certainly plenty of other members that feel that.
How many members? Okay, as you've raised the question, here's me bigging up the Magic Circle. Oh, you raised it.
Yeah.
Here's me bigging up the Magic Circle. It's a badge of excellence. The Magic Circle has 1,500 members, diverse range around the world. Of those 1,500 members, how many would you give a gig to?
Well, first of all, let's say I don't know all 1,500 members. So
how many do you know? How many do you know? You're a membership secretary, weren't you?
I would. Well, I mean, I probably know who I've spoken to at least 2/3 of them over my time as membership.
Sounds pretty good. So, of the 1,000 people, it becomes a percentage.
I don't know. I don't know.
1,000 people know as membership secretary, whose job it was to know all of them, but it doesn't matter. 2 guys, I'll let you off. award-winning magician.
What I was going to say was just because I know them and I've spoken to some of them, I don't know what they're like as a performer.
Okay, of 1,000 people, how many do you know as performers?
The people who I know as performers, probably who I've seen perform live at a gig, probably, let's say 100.
So of the 1,500 members of the Magic Circle, 100 you would book.
No, 100 to 150 I've seen perform live at a gig.
And how many would you book of the people you've seen?
10.
Of the 1,500 members of the Magic
Depends what job it was. Yeah, 10 to 20. Yeah.
Bit alarming, isn't it?
I should have made this. Well, that's not. I mean, you're asking a very specific question there, which I think is a bit loaded in a way. Because
it's not loaded. I think you brought it up. Okay, I was saying a badge of excellence, the Magic Circle, 1,500 members around the world. You said.
I know, but first of all, as I said to you, I don't know all of them. I don't know all of them.
You know 2/3 of them. You know 2/3.
Yeah, but I haven't seen them perform. To say that I'd only booked 10 people out of 1,000 is a manipulation of the facts. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Correct the manipulation.
I know.
What are the facts?
I know 10 to 20 people, probably closer to 20, well enough to think, yeah, I'd pass them on a gig, and it's probably a bit higher, probably a little bit higher than that, but and it depends what job it is. I've passed. Who did I gave Martin Cox a gig just before, a job just before Christmas because they wanted someone that looked like a sort of hard man,
Correct.
No, Martin.
Is that what you said? They wanted someone who looked like Shrek.
But no, someone that looked like a gangster. But so you pass people jobs for various different reasons, but in terms of actually solid, if you're talking about a close-up gig, for good money, I would say there's probably a bit more than 10, maybe 15 to 20 people that I'd be really confident to give a gig to. That's not to say that the other people, that's not to say that I think everyone else is rubbish. That's not true at all, right? But you're asking a very specific question in terms of, would you give a gig to, who would you give a gig to? And that question, in and of itself becomes, hang on a sec, I need to make sure that person's representing me and they're going to do a really good job, and they're going to smash it, not just be quite good,
But the Magic Circle is not about quite good, is it? The Magic Circle is it's the preeminent badge of excellence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But as I alluded to earlier, and yourself, there are there's certainly people who are at the circle that I wouldn't give a job to. Yeah.
You're an examiner as well, aren't you, Lee Hathaway?
I think that's a fair thing to say, and I'm sure that probably upsets or it may upset some people, but that is
there's no may about it.
Anyone, I think anyone worth their salt can, if they examine what has been said there, would agree with that. Would you give how many people do you know at the Magic Circle?
All of them, every single member by name, because I'm very good at names.
1,500 members,
Yeah, 1,500. I know them. I'm very good with names. I've got a little technique which involves a penknife. I'll teach you to one time.
How many would you give a job to? How many would you give a gig to?
All of them, because it's a badge
You've never given me a gig.
I'll have them all on the show, because one of them is going to be not an award-winning magician. That's the one I'm going to book. That's the first one I'm going to book. That's top of my list. The one who's not an award-winning magician.
I answered honestly rather than the evasiveness.
So, you're an examiner. You're an examiner, Lee Hathaway. Of all the people that you've passed to be members of the Magic Circle, how many of those would you give a gig to?
That's a good question.
That's my job for good questions.
Yeah, let me see. Uh, somewhere in the probably somewhere in the region of 40-50%.
Why? Well, why not 100%? And this is where I'm getting to. I know it's a
Because you're using the benchmark of would you give a gig to somebody as as a way of defining whether or not they're any good. And as I said to you before, I don't think that's fair, because the question of whether or not I'd give a gig to someone, I don't think, there's people who I think are brilliant. No, I'm going to give you an example. Guy Hollingworth, right, is an incredible magician, right? I wouldn't give him one of my gigs going and performing at Christmas to an office party, right? That doesn't, and Guy Hollingworth, legendary, brilliant, right? I wouldn't want him going to an office party that I've been booked at, or Paul Martin or Etienne's been booked at, or Faye Presto's at, right? Who I know can handle a rowdy crowd when they've had a few drinks, right? And have put someone in there like that. That doesn't mean that I think they're a bad magician, And there's many. So the benchmark of would you give a gig to someone, I think is an unfair.
What happens if Guy went and did his John Archer routine?
I think he'd fail, because because as soon as, it'd be very funny, but don't forget, Guy doing John Archer is only funny if you know Guy and you know John Archer, right? To anybody else watching, it's a quite well spoken, well-to-do guy playing a ukulele. Actually, the more I say it, the funnier it sounds. Actually, I think it'd be a great stand-up routine.
It is hilarious. It is hilarious, and I think so.
But of course, it's funnier because you know Guy.
No, but it's funny in the same way as in the 70s. You used to get rugby players dressing up.
Well, maybe that's where Guy's been going wrong all these years. If you want
what advice are you going to give to Guy now? God, give Guy some advice.
You want to get more gigs at Christmas, not that he needs them, because he has a fortune as a barrister. But yeah, Guy, if you're watching and you want to do a few crap rowdy office parties at Christmas, pick up the ukulele, mate, because that's where you've been going wrong all these years.
It's great advice. I love it. And they will be watching it. All will be watching this, Lee, and they'll be ploughing over every word. It's got to be interesting.
No, there's and I can think of many examples like that. I think I just want to separate for a moment, the question of would you give a gig to someone and do you think someone is any good, two very separate questions.
Okay,
and
so let's deal with the second.
I'd only give a gig to 15, 20 people is not indicating that I think everyone else is rubbish, because that's absolutely not.
Let's ask so I don't let you off the hook completely. Don't let you off the hook completely. I get it, because you can say this is a type of gig, this person's not good for that gig. I book every possible talent in the world, and there are some people who are top at their game, but they're not right for a certain gig. I get that. We do the Albert Hall, that's not right for everybody. We understand. Are the other people any good? How many people of the people?
Yes, absolutely.
All good?
No.
Okay, no. That's my question then. So answer that question.
No. I would say that if I walk into the Magic Circle on a Monday night, right, and you have to remember that there's apprentices there as well, who are learning. So we'll exclude those from the equation, because it's not fair to, they're there as an apprentice, right? But of the members, if I was there on a Monday night and there were 150 odd members in there, I would have thought I could point out, 4 or 5 people that I don't think are of a standard to be performing professionally, and I think that anyone who's honest about it as a member would say the same thing. And if they're on, and that's me being very honest about it. And yeah, I do think that. Yeah. And I think it's
as a badge of excellence.
I think it's unfortunate, but
as a badge of excellence, because it is important. It is important. What would you do about it?
What would I do about it? Well, it's very difficult, because you can't revoke someone's membership.
Why not? You can with a driving license. Why not?
Yeah. Well. Yeah, if it would be Yeah, I mean, it'd be an incredibly harsh thing to do, wouldn't it? It's supposed to, you know,
Why?
it's a club. It's,
Why is
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
No, we just
There
said
we go.
it's a
But you've
bad
defined brilliant. You've defined the policy. Andrew Eborn's policy. This is why, you know, there's a bit of, there you go, Andrew, a bit of a, you know, totalitarian there. If you're no good, Andrew Eborn is kicking you out. Vote for Andrew.
I think it's very simple. If it's a badge of excellence and you're no longer good enough, maybe you weren't good enough in the first place, it devalues that badge of excellence. That's my opinion.
I mean, you know, one of the arguments that you know you could come up with is, you know, a bit like, you know, like you said about the driving licenses, having to redo an exam every
yes, absolutely.
10 years or
Because
something
if you're
like
going to bang
that.
into somebody because you're no good at driving,
yeah,
you know, go.
Yeah. But it'd be awfully sad though. But, you know, but then you'd have the situation of, you know, all these ideas get banded about, and, you know, then the problem is once you start looking at them, you know, you see all the pitfalls in it. I mean, you know,
there's
you
no
have the situation of,
there's not a pitfall. I started with the
but what would you do? Yeah, but what would you do if you get, okay, so you have a member, okay, who's been a brilliant magician for years and years and years and years and years, right? And then they get to, you know, and then in their later years they get to, you know, 90 years old, and they're slightly losing it a bit of dementia, their arthritis in their hands, you know, and they're a bit wobbly, you know, and you watch them, you know, and then they're not the standard they were, you know, 50 years ago, right? And they come along and do an audition, and they say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with those, who you know are brilliant?
Guided. So I think there's two sides to it. If people are still performing, and we've got that badge of excellence, that's what you need to do, because people retire at a certain thing and they're not going out and claiming that. There's the difference, and this is the problem about this sort of side. There's a difference between a club where people get together and it's fantastic, and all clubs have politics. I'm not worried about that. It's crazy. Question everything and you'll get there eventually. It's personalities. The ego has landed. That's what happens in all clubs. What I'm talking about specifically is a badge of excellence, where members of the public want to have confidence that the person they're booking is any good.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think
a badge of excellence, there has to be a quality threshold. And if you're telling me that the majority of the people that you see in the Magic Circle are not good enough to have that badge of excellence, that's not what
I said at all. That is not what I said at all. That's what, like, once again, you're going back to the thing of, you know, of how many people will I give a gig to versus, you know, I probably know maybe, you know, 100, maybe, you know, 100 odd people at the circle that I see regularly on a regular basis, you know, and of them I give a gig to around 20, you know, probably closer to 20, something like that. But that doesn't mean that I think the rest of them are rubbish, you know. But that doesn't mean that at all. You know, I think there's some very good people there. And if you know, if a job came along to me, which I have done, you know, and I've done several times in the past, you know, if there's a job that comes along that's very specific, you know, where they say, you know, we want a dove magician, you know, of course I'm not going to, you know, I'm going to think, oh, I'll find out, you know, I'll get hold of Ed or I'll get hold of Scott, or, you know, if people come along and say we want, you know, a mentor system, that's not my bag, you know, so there's people I can pass that on to, and, you know, and then I'd look wider than that sort of core scope of, you know, my key sort of 15, 20 people that I give a job to. But if you're talking about, you know, would I give a job to someone? Most of my gigs are, you know, the you know, the standard weddings, parties, bar mitzvahs, corporates, private gigs. You know, people have seen me perform somewhere, so, you know, probably, you know, most likely because most tend to come from recommendations, or they've been to my website and they want that type of, you know, that's the style they're looking for. So I need to look at people that are going to match that slightly and do a good job in a close-up environment, you know. So so that's what, you know, that's why it reduces down to that number. But once again, I would, you know, I don't want to hammer home this point, but I don't want to be accused of saying you know, I only think that there's 20 people in the Magic Circle that are any good, because that's not what I've said at all, Andrew.
No, I think you said it was 10. We love it. One of the, and you're right about certain gigs, but I think the badge of excellence, and certainly if there is a badge of excellence, the Magic Circle is one of those, and I think people should have confidence that people are good.
I think the people
around it is different. The point that you make is a good point, is that there are different styles of magician, in the same way as different styles of singers. And so often when people can sell themselves on, not don't just look at the website about the award-winning magician, because they're all those, what you can do is engage with the person. If they're going to fit into your gig, you're going to know that you've talked to them on the phone or whatever. It's not just about doing the magic, it's the person. And I think from that point of view, it's a good start, is what we can say. Nothing's perfect, but it's a good start. So we can deal with that on that sort of basis. And it's interesting because the Lee, and this is what I tell you I find interesting, Lee. It's the Lee Hathaway I've known. And a lot of people know it's that big bravado where you go, blah, this is fantastic. When pressed on a couple of points, there's a lot of vulnerability there.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I sound like my school teacher. I sound like a school report.
It doesn't. I'll tell you why it's important, because this is one of the things I'm really keen on, is people being real. And I know that so often, it's like comedians, and I do a lot in mental health, and we talk about this sort of stuff. And so often it's people wear what I call the joke cloak. And by that, I mean, you have this wonderful exterior, which is, but inside, there's a lot of torment.
And he goes silent, waiting for a comment. I don't think, yeah, I mean, I don't think that I particularly shy or refrain away from talking about, you know, sort of tumultuous times in my life. You know, certainly, you know, going through the sort of, you know, late the sort of 90s and that, you know, coming out as being gay, and you know, and you know, and the frustrations that come along with that, and you know, and the, you know, the less happy times I've had in life and that sort of thing, you know. But you know, I'm very, you know, good to say, you know, very happy now. But everyone goes through, you know, I mean, I've been, you know, everyone goes through various different struggles and torment and that sort of stuff, you know, over their lifetime. You know, some sadly far more than others, but certainly I don't think I hide behind laughing it off. I just think that it's, you know, I just think it's probably best to sort of try and be a positive and a nice person as much as you can be, you know, and have a laugh about stuff, and do realize, you know, that you know, it's you know, life is short, and it's, you know, and it's there, you know, and you should try and make the most of it, and to that end, to not try and take things too seriously, you know. So, you know, and remember the thing, you know, it will pass, and there will be a better, you know, there'll be a better time. So I don't think that I, you know, that when you talk about that bravado and that, hey, but I mean, you've seen me, you know, you and I have sat on the same Magic Circle Council before, you know, many times before, and you'll know that, you know, I can be incredibly serious and sit and have a very well constructed argument, and that goes. So that's not certainly not always the case, I don't think, you know. But
I think one of the interesting things, and we're in Pride Month. I know mental health gets a week, Pride gets a month, but people should think about that all the time. In the current situation in the world, treating people with respect, treating with understanding, and so on and so forth. It has changed when you first started. When, I mean, you mentioned about coming out. When did you come out?
Goodness me. It would have been 25, what am I now, 43, 25, probably around 1995, 1996, something like that. Yeah.
How
I mean,
old
I
were you
think
then?
I came out to my sister and some friends before my parents, were about a couple of years afterwards. But I think I was around 18, 17, 18. Something like that, yeah. When I first sort of probably accepted that I was gay, and sort of thought, well, I'm going to have to, you know, that's who I'm going to be, and then and told my sister, I think, because my sister's best friend was gay, so that was quite, you know, easier. And then I lived with a guy in Eborn Wood. We weren't partners, we were just housemates, but he was gay. He was a dancer, professional dancer. Used to work at Trade nightclub, which some of viewers may know as at Turnmills, which is a wonderful nightclub, and it was one of the sort of pioneers of sort of the gay sort of late night house music, dance music thing. Used to go on until 5 a.m. It was a marvelous club, and he was one of the professional dancers there, and did some other stuff. But but he was quite camp and quite obviously gay, whereas I'm not, never have been. But and I think my parents used to come round, and we were driving down to Elstree and Bournemouth station one day, and my dad said, Simon's very camp, isn't he? And I said, oh yeah, yeah. And he went, oh, is he gay? And I went, yeah, yeah, yeah. And my dad said, and I was sat in the back of the car, and my dad said, and you're not, are you? And I thought, well, I've never, I haven't come out to them at that point, but I thought I'm not gonna, if you're asking me directly the question, I'm not gonna lie to you at that point, So so I said, yeah. So that's how that came about, and then I went over and we had the heart to heart, and and all that sort of stuff, a week later and that. So yeah, it's I mean, it's weird thinking back on it now, and how easy it is. Not for everybody, and certainly not around the world, and certainly not even in this country for so many people, And again, I know members of the Magic Circle, but certainly in the entertainment industry, who struggle greatly with their sort of sexual identity, But it's it's strange to think what an actual a big thing that was at the time, and how much it defines your character, and how much you have to hide before you can come out, and how nerve-wracking it is at the time, especially considering how much things have changed even in the last 20, 25, 30 years. I mean, you will remember, and anyone that grew up, I can remember growing up in the 80s. My dad was a postman. He used to come home and bring the Sun newspaper home every day, and I always used to have a flick through, and the Sun, constantly headlines like, when EastEnders had 2 gay guys on it, the headlines EastBenders, and what an outrage it was, and AIDS is a gay disease, and all these things were sort of ingrained in your mental culture, and they don't go away, even nowadays they don't entirely go away. You still remember being told all that as a kid, so and of course now you can look on it and reflect about how how intrinsically evil that was to my mind, but people think when you come out and you become gay and you go and and you go off and it's okay now because people can get married and get and blah blah blah, and I think my dad said to me a few years ago, why let's be honest, but gay relationships do tend to fail a lot more than heterosexual relationships. And that's a really why question, because you have to examine why is that? Is it because is it because gay men or lesbians are intrinsically more crap at relationships, or might it have something to do with the fact that you're talking about a lot of people that have come from a generation that have gone through mental turmoil and are still reliving the effects of that, which means they have more mental health issues, they have higher prevalence of distorted relationships, etc., which is probably far more, probably got far more to do with it than the fact that just lesbians and gays are crap at relationships. You know what I mean? That's probably it's the same as the racism card, isn't it? When you say in this area, it's mostly black youths that do this thing. Well, is that because of the color of the skin, or might it be to do with the socioeconomic conditions that have created, and the prejudice in the first place that's created that situation, which is far more likely to be the case, So, yeah, I mean, Matthew Todd wrote a great book. He was the editor of Gay Times and not Gay Times. I can't remember which one it was now, but one of the Attitude, yeah. And obviously a great gay activist for many years. And Paul Kiev put me onto it, actually. Who Paul Kiev recommended this book to me, and it's an excellent book, and it's called Straight Jacket, which is all about and it's written from the point of view of someone growing up around that time, and it's all about living through the sort of late 80s, early 90s, the HIV, all the stuff that happened with HIV, and the stigma that was attached to that, and the stigma that was attached to being gay, and coming out of it, and all the mental health issues, and the things like drug addiction and alcoholism, and all these, and deep insecurity, eating disorders that have caused, and how to get out of that, the tagline for the book is overcoming society's legacy of gay shame, which is And it's a great book and when I read it, it was incredible because there were so many things in it I could relate to, which don't really get spoken about very much by, everyone just thinks, oh, it's all right now because, everyone's quite accepting, and can get married and you've got all the, and you've got all the right, so everything's fine, and it's, and not realizing that you've lived through that, and, and those things still, I wouldn't say haunt you, but define who you are as a person, there's a wonderful, play that Lee Warren, who's a great friend of mine, who you should try and get him on here sometime. We went to see a play called The Inheritance I believe it was in the Novello Theatre, same place where Andy Nyman had his ghost stories, and it's a 7.5 hour play, and it's in 2 sections, and you think to yourself, goodness me, 7.5 hours, that's a hell of a long time to sit through a play, and it's about the HIV epidemic in America in the 80s, and about how essentially an entire generation of gay people were wiped out, and that story's never really been told, and it was the first time that actual story had been told, and it was mesmerizing, and I'm getting a bit emotional talking about it now, actually, because I mean, Lee, if you speak to Lee, speak to me, it's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen, and people were, after the first half, people were literally hugging each other and in tears, and it was an incredible experience. And after the 7 hours, there's just this silence that goes over the theatre for people to sit there stunned for ages. It's an absolute magnum opus, and I don't know if it'll ever be done again because it's such a huge production to put on and such an effort. But it was quite remarkable, to know that story, and also to know that. This in the same sense of, if you look at that and go, wow, 10 or 15 years earlier, that could have been me. You know what I mean? And certainly, I knew people that died of HIV, in the late 90s, early thousands, and that before the treatment got a lot better than it is today. So that's certainly a big thing for me in terms of how do you find your character and that.
And I think it's one of those sort of things. I always talk about sort of unfinished business. And when you're sitting in your car with your father, and he makes a comment like, "You're not one of those."
He didn't say that. He didn't say that, actually. No. I mean, he didn't say that. That's not. You're like a tabloid journalist the way you twist some of the things I've said. I said, so what you're saying is your dad's a massive homophobe Nazi, and all members of the Magic Circle are crap. Is that it, Lee? So you could get a job at the Sun newspaper with those guys. No, my dad didn't say it like that. He just said, "You're not." Although my dad had, my dad's very good because he's open-minded enough to learn and to know where he's been sort of, ignorant, or you can't blame people, and change his mind on a lot of things, but you can't blame people for having those prejudices, because my dad grew up in South London, and went to work at the post office and hung about with his mates who went, "Oh bloody hell, keep your back against the wall, lads," and all that, and it's not, and it comes from higher above, because it comes from the people in power that are printing the newspapers, and the zeitgeist that's been put out to people, through the media and through those sort of channels, and even when you had, and even if you go back before the 80s, and you look at, and this is, it's interesting. I was listening to LBC the other day, and someone was talking, and they had a lady on talking about the situation in the States at the moment, and black role models and that sort of stuff, and the civil rights movement, and how far we moved on in those last 50 years. And the same thing as when you were, when I was a kid, there were no real gay role models. People weren't, the gay people that you had on television in the early 80s, like Frankie Howard and John Inman, and gay, and it's still, and what's amazing is it still reflects in society these days, which is incredible, because You know, we're 30, 40 years on from that, and yet you still get people who will say to you, "Go, oh, you don't seem very gay to me," because their perception of gay is, "Oh, hello, darling, how are you?" You know, and it's like, you know, and there's hundreds of thousands of gay people that are not like that. You know what I mean? And in fact, there's a lot that characterize. You know, when I first came out, I remember, and a lot of youngsters did this as well. When I first came out, I was more camp, right? And a lot of people came out because you sort of felt like, oh shit, I'm out now, I'm gay. Now that has to be my identity. Do you know what I mean? So you start going around and going, oh, I don't know, blah, 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 you know, and that's sort of, you know, and then you go, oh no, that's not my identity. I'm not camp like that, you know, but a lot of people personify that because they feel that, you know, not so much these days, but certainly years ago, because that's what you had to do if you were gay, you know, be that, you know, dye your hair blonde and, you know, and all the rest, you know, and call everyone love and honey and, you know, and do all that, you know. And that came, you know, and that's because those were the people that were in the media. You know, you didn't have, you know, a regular bloke who's a builder or something, you know, identifying as gay, you know, and even now, look, I mean, we're in, you know, all these years on, you know, and it's impossible to find an out gay professional footballer. You're telling me of the entire Premier League that none of them are gay. I mean, it's just, it was
Fashion,
ludicrous.
didn't he?
Yeah, and look what, Fashion who came out, and look what happened to him, you know, and then his brother, you know, I mean, you know, he went through, and I think he came out after, as far as I know, he came out after it. I'm not big into football, but he came out after he sort of had his professional career, if my memory serves me right, yeah. But yeah, I mean, and that's it, you know, of the entire Premier League for the last 20, 30 years, there's only been one gay footballer that came out after. I mean, I can tell you for a fact, I know there's more than that because I know people that have slept with them.
You say Sun journalists. Who are those people?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, wouldn't you like to know? Yeah.
I tell you, it's been a real.
I can categorically sit here and say I don't just think there's more than that. I know for a fact there are. You know, but even now in 2020, those people don't come out. You know, that's remarkable. When you think, if you spoke to yourself or your man on the street, you think, oh, it's all right now because everything's fine. Do you know what I mean? It's, you know, everything's fine. There's no, you know, there isn't homophobia in the UK these days like there used to be. Do you know what I mean? What are you worrying about? And yet, if you're a young gay person who happens to really like football, you don't have any role models. You know, and if you're a young gay person who happens to really like football and you go to your football club, right, you're not going to come out as gay because there's still an intrinsic thing to, you know, a shield over that saying you can't be a really good footballer and be gay, you know, and that exists now, Andrew. Do you know what I mean? So it's not done in that sense, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, isn't it? And the problem is now everybody's so obsessed with their personal brand. It's like leading men and women in when they act. They're not allowed to be seen to be having relationships because the whole idea is that you're supposed to be seen to be available and so on and so forth. And it's the pressure, if you like, of having.
I will just mention very quickly David Beckham, because David Beckham has done a lot for to try and although obviously he's a heterosexual man, but he's posed for a lot of gay magazines and he's very much championed that cause. So good on him in that respect. You know what I mean? You know, which has helped. But what would be nice is maybe to encourage some of his teammates or other people to come out. You know, there's out gay people in rugby. You know, it really would be something. You know, in that environment. Yeah.
So if your one wish, and then we will get you back because there's lots more to discuss. It's got to be. and I know that you've lit the fire, you've lit the blue touch paper, and many people.
Well, I'm here. I'm here on one thing that we've not mentioned, but people have probably noticed in the background is I'm here on the boat.
I know. Yeah. Give us to finish with then. Tell us about the boat and your new life there and how you're coping.
Well, I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. I mean, it's I'm having a marvelous time. I love living on a boat. I always wanted to live on a boat. It wasn't done on a whim. I always wanted to live on a boat, and the circumstances in my life prevailed that I made some money on a flat I had in South London. I didn't want to be in the flat anymore for various reasons, which is, you know, break my relationship. John Randall, who, you know, was one of my closest mates, passed away, and my nan died that year, so I just wanted to sell the flat. And I thought, well, what do? Do I go and get another mortgage, buy a bigger place, have another room, rent it out, use it as an office, move further out of London, you know, get a bigger house, etc. And I thought, I don't really want a bigger house. I don't use the space I'm in at the moment. I go between the bedroom and the kitchen, you know, and that, you know, and that's it. I thought I don't really want another room with a lodger. I'm not overly, you know, not being a landlord doesn't usually appeal to me. I don't particularly want to share my kitchen with other people, and that's so. So then I thought, well, what do? You know, I know I don't want to be in this flat anymore. And I thought, well, I've always wanted to live on a boat. It's always been a bit of a pipe dream, but now it could be a reality. Let's go and look at some boats. And I thought, and the good thing is, if I do go and live on a boat, well, I've made some money on the property. You know, I can end up mortgage free, actually owning the place that I live in. And when I say owning it, I don't mean owning it with a huge debt to the bank. Actually, you know, I look at this boat every time I come back to it and go, I own that. No one can take it away from you. That's mine. And have money in the bank and be debt free and be debt free, and also not have to worry about work so much. Whereas in the past, when I was struggling to, you know, pay all the bills and that, you know, I'd go and do every single gig that, you know, came along. Now, you know, after that, I could be more selective and go, right, I'm not going to go and do those cheap, you know, the cheaper jobs or the, you know, the this and that. So hence I moved to the boat, and one of the best things I ever did, without a doubt. I absolutely love living on a boat. I mean, it suits me down to the ground. It's
and
totally
the great
me.
thing, and a lot of people won't know this, it's actually surprisingly cheap to live on a boat. You can buy a boat. I think it's Apollo Duck. That's one of the sites. I know there are others as well.
Yeah.
But you can buy a boat. Can I ask you, how much was your boat?
My boat, I paid. It was up for 120,000, and in the end, I paid just under 100,000 for it, because it was a show boat.
Put it in perspective, and if you move, just for that, I mean, look into it. I'll bring you back specifically about boats, because I have a few people who I know who live on boats. When you're looking at the price of a broom cupboard in central London, you wouldn't get 100 grand, less than 100 grand.
You can buy it. You can, I mean, this. Yeah, I mean, this is a luxury wide beam boat. I mean, it's top of the range, you know, and you know, and anyone that's been on it will tell you that. And yet, you know, and you can pick up a narrow boat if you want. You know, I didn't want a narrow boat's a bit too small for me, because, you know, I'm 6'7", but you can pick up a narrow boat for 20, 30 grand. You know,
I know. And the
the
great thing is, you can keep moving every 2 weeks, can't you? And it doesn't cost that much for mooring. So we're going to the Holy. If you want to look at that, Apollo Doug, did you go through Apollo, or where did you get yours through?
Apollo Duck's always a good website to go on. Yeah, ABN boat brokerage in the best thing really to do, if anyone's serious about buying a boat, the best thing to do is go and have a trip to Daventry in Northampton, because that's where all the canals meet, and that's where all the big marinas are that sell the boats. Or go to Quick Boat Show when it's back on, which is where this boat came from. This boat was brand new, so yeah, it is cheap. There's always maintenance to do on a boat. There's always things to sort of keep it ship shape, if you like, you know. But then, you know,
absolutely.
But you get that.
Not being ship shape, is there?
You get that with a house as well, Andrew. Do you know what I mean? You get that with a house.
You know?
Ship-shaped house. No.
You're right.
One of the things I've heard so often when I've been chatting to people on Zoom or in other calls and that sort of stuff, is people saying, well, you know, we're all in the same boat at the moment, and I always raise a little smile thinking, no, you're not. You know?
On that very, very happy note, we will get you back. There's lots more to discuss. I think tonight you have lit those touch papers everywhere. The Twitter sphere is going to go crazy. I love that. Well done. You've touched on many, many topics. Thank you for your honesty as well. And we'll get you back. But for now,
so what's your headline? What's your headline for this, Andrew?
I'm going to let you write it.
All magic circle magicians are crap.
Don't let the truth stand in the way of a good story, I think, is always useful. We love it. Lee, thank you very much for joining me. Take care.
Bye, Andrew. Bye-bye. Bye.
There you go. So another award-winning magician, but actually a lovely guy, Lee Hathaway, on his boat. And it is extraordinary, isn't it? You can get a boat for surprisingly little money. Do look at that, Apollo Duck and other sites. If you've got any comments, and there must be comments on that, write the comments in the section below. If you'd like to subscribe to Octopus TV, Subscribe. It's very easy. Just press that button. It's free. If you don't want to subscribe to Octopus TV, subscribe, press that button. It's free. Doesn't matter. In any event, do join me next time. Write to me, lol@octopustv.com. If you want to be on the show, I'd love to hear from you. But for me, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'll see you next time.